Ever feel like you need a time machine? Like, just hit a button and escape to, I don't know, ancient Rome, maybe?
Grab some sandals, try on a toga.
Exactly. Well, today, we're your time machine. Get ready to explore first century Palestine.
The time of Jesus.
We're going deep into this world, and trust me, it's more connected to our own than you might think.
It's true. When you think connected world, you probably picture smartphones and the internet.
Right. But this deep dive, it's going to change how you see things.
We're cracking open the Urantia book, specifically paper 121, The Times of Michael's Bestowal.
And don't worry, you don't need to be a scholar to get it. We're breaking it down, making it crystal clear.
Think of it this way. How do ideas spread when you don't have Twitter or Facebook?
Or even a printing press, for that matter.
That's the question, isn't it? Back then, going viral was a whole different ballgame.
Okay, so no internet, no mass media. How did news travel back then? Smoke signals. Carrier pigeons.
Picture this. Roman roads.
Okay, roads, I got it. But what do roads have to do with anything?
They weren't just roads. They were like ancient superhighways, crisscrossing the entire landscape.
Okay, I'm picturing those old Roman chariots kicking up dust.
Not exactly Instagram, but you get the idea. These roads were the information arteries of the ancient world.
Okay, so news could travel, but people weren't speaking Latin on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
Back then, there were a zillion different languages, weren't there?
You're right. Communication could get pretty tricky, but there was a secret weapon. Greek.
Oh, Greek, like the philosophers?
That's the one. Greek was like the universal language back then.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone from, scholars to merchants, they all spoke Greek.
So kind of like English today.
Yeah, something like that. It meant ideas could jump from person to person with like zero language barrier.
That makes sense. Shared language, check. But there had to be more to it than just roads and small talk, right? What else made this era such a melting pot?
Well, don't forget about the Jewish diaspora.
The what now?
The diaspora. It's like, imagine a network of Jewish communities spread out all over the vast Roman Empire.
So instead of everyone living in one place.
Exactly. We're talking from Spain all the way to, like, Iraq.
Wow, that's spread out.
It was like the original LinkedIn, connecting people across continents.
Okay, so instead of trending on Twitter, a message back then could spread through this ancient network. It's like the original retweet.
You got it. But hold on, there's another layer to this. Because it wasn't just about external connections. Within Judaism itself, there were some serious divisions.
Whoa, wait, you mean it wasn't all one big happy family?
Not exactly.
Okay.
Imagine debating the meaning of a text, like really getting into the nitty-gritty. That's what was happening with the Torah.
Okay, the Torah, that's like their Bible, right?
Exactly. And there were two main camps, two different ways of understanding it. There was the Western interpretation, more influenced by Greek thought.
That Hellenistic view, right?
Yep, that's the one. And then you had the Eastern interpretation, rooted in Babylonian tradition.
So, like two totally different ways of looking at the same text. That's intense. Can you give me an example? Like, how would that actually play out?
Sure. Think about dietary laws, keeping kosher.
Okay, yeah.
The Western, more Hellenistic thinkers, they might say, hey, as long as you're honoring the spirit of the law, maybe you could be a little flexible with the specifics.
So like a more modern take on ancient rules.
You could say that. But then the Eastern Babylonian tradition, they might say, hold on, these laws are here for a reason. We need to follow them to the letter, no exceptions.
Wow, talk about a recipe for some awkward family dinners.
Right. It wasn't just about food, though. This was about who held the power, whose voice got to define the faith.
That's a power struggle we still see today, right? Who gets to decide what's true according to religious texts?
Exactly. It's a timeless debate. And remember, all of this is happening under Roman rule. So you've got this internal pressure cooker within Judaism, and at the same time, the Gentile world is undergoing its own spiritual shifts.
Okay, so the Gentiles, meaning non-Jewish folks.
Yeah.
Right. So what were they up to?
You got it. It wasn't just the Jewish community grappling with these big questions. It was like the whole Roman world was hitting this spiritual crossroads.
So what were their options? If you were like a spiritual seeker back then, what was on the menu besides, gladiators and stuff?
Well, if you were a thinker, an intellectual type, you might have been drawn to the philosophical schools. Stoicism was big at the time.
Stoicism, right. Weren't those the guys who were all about, like, being super disciplined?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Virtue, reason, keeping a stiff upper lip no matter what.
Sounds a little intense for my taste.
You and me both. But that was their thing, keeping those emotions in check.
Okay, so not exactly the life of the party. What other philosophical flavors were there?
On the flip side, You had Epicureanism,
Which was all about,
pleasure, happiness, avoiding pain.
sign me up. Although something tells me it wasn't all just lounging around eating grapes.
Haha, you're right. They weren't just about indulging in every whim. They had a more uh, nuanced view than their reputation might suggest.
Okay, well, that's good to know. But still, it seems like both Stoicism and Epicureanism were more for the, I don't know, the elites, like not your average person on the street.
That's a good point. They were definitely more popular with the educated class. So
Yeah.
what about everyone else?
Yeah, what did your average Roman turn to for spiritual fulfillment?
Well, this is where things get really interesting. This era saw the rise of the mystery religions.
Mystery religions. Okay, now you've piqued my interest. What are we talking about here?
Think secret rituals, promises of a better afterlife, a more personal connection with the divine.
Hold on. Secret rituals and promises of a better afterlife. This is starting to sound kind of familiar.
Exactly. It's like the ancient world had its own version of self-help movements or even some New Age stuff.
So, are you saying that people back then were just as obsessed with self-improvement and finding deeper meaning as we are today?
It's a tale as old as time, right? That humans search for something more, something bigger than ourselves. It takes many forms, but the longing is the same.
I can see that. So, let's recap for a second. We've got Roman roads connecting the empire, Greek as the universal language, Jewish communities hoping for the Messiah.
And Gentiles exploring everything from Stoicism to mystery cults.
It's like a powder keg of cultures and ideas, and this is the world Jesus walks into.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And talk about making an entrance. Here comes Jesus, this carpenter from Nazareth, turning expectations upside down. His message was both radically countercultural and strangely familiar, all at the same time.
Okay, but what was so radical about it? He wasn't preaching in some alien language, was he?
True, he was very much a product of his time, but his message challenged the prevailing Jewish worldview in some pretty fundamental ways. Remember those debates we talked about? Strict adherence to the law versus evolving interpretations.
Yeah, the kosher food fight, good times.
Right. Now imagine the tension when this guy starts saying, love your enemies.
Whoa, wait, what? Love your enemies?
Right.
That's like the opposite of what everyone was saying back then.
Exactly. It flew in the face of the entire legal system of the time, which was all about retribution, an eye for an eye, and all that.
It's hard to imagine someone dropping a message of like radical love and forgiveness in that climate. Did anyone even listen?
That's just it. His message was so different, so counterintuitive, that it cut through the noise. He spoke to a deep longing in the human heart, a longing that went beyond those religious and political divides.
Okay, that makes sense. But how is Jesus's message any different from, say, those mystery cults that were so popular? Weren't they promising salvation and a better afterlife too?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what set Jesus apart. See, the mystery cults, they were all about initiation, secret knowledge, rituals. You had to be in the club to reap the benefits.
So it was like an exclusive VIP lounge for the afterlife.
Pretty much. But Jesus, his message was the opposite. It was radical accessibility. He was saying, the kingdom of God is within you. You don't need a secret handshake or a magic potion. It's about a personal transformation, a direct connection with the divine.
So instead of saying, perform this ritual and you'll be saved, he was saying, change your heart.
Exactly. It's about internal transformation, not external rituals.
So we've talked about Jesus, his message, the impact it had, but we can't forget about the guy who took that message on the road, right?
You mean Paul?
Exactly. Paul, the guy who turned it into a movement. At least that's how it seems to me.
Yeah, you could say that. Paul is essential if you really want to understand how Christianity went from like this small Jewish sect to, well, a global religion.
Right. It's a huge leap. And honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on the details. Give me the Paul 101 crash course.
Okay, so imagine Paul as this like ultimate translator, building bridges between cultures. Because you've got Jesus's message,
Deeply
right?
rooted in Jewish tradition.
Exactly. So Paul has to take that and make it resonate with the Gentile world.
So he's like the ancient world's influencer, making sure the message goes viral, reaches a whole new audience.
That's a great way to put it. And he was good at it, like really savvy. It wasn't just about translating languages either. Paul, he drew on all this knowledge, Greek philosophy.
The Stoics, the Epicureans, all that.
Yep. Even the mystery religions. He wove those threads into his teachings about Jesus.
Wow. Talk about knowing your audience. So how did that go over? Were people into it?
It was a mixed bag, honestly. I mean, on the one hand, his approach was brilliant. Like, he found a way to make the message click for people who were already searching, you know?
Yeah, those spiritual seekers we talked about.
Right. Like, he emphasized this idea of salvation through faith in Jesus.
Which would have resonated with anyone familiar with, say, the mystery cult.
Exactly, because they were all about personal redemption too, so he's finding that common ground. But like I said, it was a mixed bag. Not everyone was thrilled with Paul's adaptations, you could say.
Oh, yeah. Who wasn't happy?
Well, some of the early Christians, the ones who were really rooted in Jewish tradition.
They probably felt like he was, I don't know, watering down the message or something.
Yes, exactly. Like he was straying too far from Jesus' original teachings.
It's that classic tension, isn't it? Staying true to the original message versus adapting for a new audience. It never goes away. I mean, think about how bands change their sound to appeal to a wider audience.
Or how movies get remade for different cultures.
Right. Sometimes it works. Sometimes not so much.
It's a debate that's still going strong, even now. But the fact that it was happening back then, well, it shows you how complex it all was and how human, really. These were real people grappling with these big questions, trying to figure out how to live out their faith in, let's face it, a pretty messy world.
Yeah. It makes you realize we might have our smartphones and the internet and all that, but some things never really change, do they? We started by talking about Roman roads, and here we are, still asking the same questions about faith, identity, how to make a difference.
It's amazing, isn't it, how relevant this ancient story still is. And it makes you wonder, what will people say about our information superhighway 2,000 years from now?
Right. Will they look back at our Twitter threads and be like, wow, so profound? I mean, who knows? But I kind of doubt it.
Probably not. But on a more serious note, what we can take away from all this is that even in a world that's like drowning in information, the fundamentals of connection, they still matter. Shared languages, common experiences, a good story, those are the things that bring people together, that help ideas spread, whether it's ancient Rome or the digital age.
It's that human need to connect, right? It transcends time and technology. So as you're scrolling through your feed today, remember those lessons from first century Palestine. Think about how you're connecting with others, how you're sharing your own story. You might not be starting a global movement, but hey, you never know. Keep asking those big questions, keep diving deep.